We want to talk more on this now with Behnam Ben Taleblu. He's a research fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and as you see, he joins us from our DC bureau. Thanks for your time today, Behnam. I just want to ask, as we try to understand what's happening with the US and Iran, how North Korea complicates this whole equation, because we've seen the Trump administration use the power of economic sanctions to get North Korea to the negotiating table. But will this work with Iran when it comes to making a revised nuclear deal, considering that as far as other countries are concerned, it is in compliance?
Well, good morning, Anne-Marie. Good morning, Errol. Great to be back with you. There's no need to actually pivot to North Korea because the penalties that the president has actually sought to restore after leaving the JCPOA nuclear deal are the exact same penalties that were in force in U.S. law prior to the nuclear deal and were waived by the nuclear deal. And it was those penalties that helped drive the Iranians to the table. So simply by resurrecting that legal architecture, that coercive financial architecture, the president is hoping to be able to generate pressure on Tehran, drive them to the table again, but not just for a revised nuclear deal, but for a much more broader, comprehensive agreement. The administration has emphasized a treaty to make it much more long-lasting that deals with the whole range of Iranian malign activity.
So Iran's rebuttal to this basically is, they held some major military drills, and they basically said, listen, this is backfiring on the U.S. It's actually isolating the U.S. Is there any truth to that? We know the other signers of the agreement, were very vocal in their disappointment of having the U.S. pull out of the agreement. So is there anything valid about the Trump administration choosing to do this and making the U.S. sort of isolating the U.S. more?
Well, while hyperbole and outlandish statements are not new in Tehran, it really depends on the measure that you're looking for. If you're looking for economic measures, banks, businesses, those entities are really siding with Washington's interpretation of what's been going on. They're choosing to remain risk-averse, not to invest in Tehran. Hence, you've had this exodus of foreign firms from Iran since May 8th. But politically, lots of countries, particularly the EU countries, as well as the other P5+1 countries like Russia and China, are taking cover under the UN Security Council resolution 2231 that enshrined the deal, and they're using this active UN resolution as political cover to say, no, we want to continue the deal, and hence they're finding creative mechanisms to keep the deal alive and essentially work with Tehran to bypass U.S. sanctions. But what this means is that they are complicit in helping Tehran bust sanctions, and I think there will be some sort of ramification for that down the line.
What is the reality on the ground in Tehran? Our Elizabeth Palmer was showing us kind of the mood there. The currency is losing its value because, in part, to what's happening here. So what is stopping Iran from restarting its nuclear program and doing economic business with Russia and China?
Well, I feel like those are two slightly different points, because while the focus in Washington tends to be on sanctions and coercive economic measures, there really is another side to this pressure pincer, and that's the pressure from the population on the regime. You saw this starting in December 2017, where it was the regime's social base that was protesting against it. Economic issues, political issues, religious, even social issues were at the forefront here. But on the other side, what's keeping Iran within the deal, I actually don't think it's politics. I think it's a larger strategy. Elements of the regime, particularly the ones that negotiated the deal, are looking to kind of stay within the broad boundaries of the JCPOA to win this moral argument against the U.S., but also they're banking on a one-term Trump administration, and they want to have whoever whichever new U.S. administration comes in after 2, 4, or 6 years, to have that administration enter the nuclear deal on one knee. So the Iranians right now, in the short term, are banking on trying to endure the pain of these sanctions. That's why the U.S. needs to make this a genuine maximum pressure campaign if it wants to see any dividends.
You talked about the Iranian people. For a while there, what we heard from the Secretary of State and from the President over and over again was, the Iranian people have to do something about their government. There was clearly the suggestion that, maybe there could be a regime change if the Iranian people would just rise up. But then we show this, video of these protesters, and it seems like their ire is directed at the United States. What do you make of some of this video and these protests that we've seen?
Well, those are actually politically potent protests because, and this is just the way the Iranian political calendar works, November 4th, or the 13th of Aban on the Iranian calendar, is the day that the regime commemorates the storming of the U.S. embassy in Tehran and the beginning of the U.S. hostage crisis. So actually November 5th, the day the sanctions are in force, neatly followed this large pro-regime holiday. So I wouldn't take the crowds on the street that day as a measure of how the political sentiment is on the streets. Usually it's quite the opposite. Usually if the Iranian people were left to their own devices, you would see more pro-Americanism than this kind of regime-sponsored anti-Americanism.
Hey, Behnam, that's why we have you here to give us a little bit of context. Behnam Ben Taleblu, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.